Welcome in then to the latest edition of ESPN FC. I'm Dan Thomas. What a treat it is to be back in Connecticut with Steve Nicol and Craig Burley.
That's the only reason we came in, because we knew you were coming back from your holiday.
Well, no, what holidays? I've been working hard.
Nice.
Working hard. Yes, we had
Nice.
great time. My goodness, it was fantastic.
So it was a holiday?
It was a work trip. Let's talk about Rasmus Hojlund. He looks on the brink now of signing for Manchester United. Of course, we talked about this at length over the last couple of weeks. 75 million euros looks to be the fee, plus add-ons for the player from Atalanta, of course, only 20 years old, the Danish international. For more on this, let's welcome in, Nicky Bandini is with us, as is Mark Ogden. Mark, this all looks all set to be done. Is this the striker that Ten Hag wanted?
Well, it's all set to be done. The medical's underway, but whether he's the guy that was top of Ten Hag's list at the start of the summer is probably doubtful. I think that was Harry Kane, but we know that United didn't want to get involved with Tottenham and Daniel Levy and the cost of getting it done. You know, Victor Osimhen wasn't gettable, and I think once you start going down the list, United realised there wasn't a lot of options out there. And Hojlund, you know, Ten Hag knows what he's like. He's got potential. He's a young player that they can hopefully groom into one of the top strikers in Europe. But it is a gamble. I think it's definitely a gamble because he's not ready yet, and I think there's a lot of pressure on a player's shoulders to wear the number 9 at Man United because nobody's done it particularly well for about 10 years now since Robin van Persie was there. So there is big pressure on Hojlund, and that is the question mark. He's got the talent. Is he strong enough mentally yet to deal with the pressure of playing for Man United?
Nicky, how big a gamble is it in your eyes?
It's a pretty big gamble. I've been talking about Hojlund a lot, obviously, the last few days, and I've obviously been watching him last season in Serie A, and he's a player that I'm enthusiastic about. He's a player that I think has, exactly as Mark just said, got bags of potential. But he is someone who scored 9 goals in Serie A last season. You're not talking about someone, the names you just mentioned, Harry Kane, Victor Osimhen. You're not talking about one of these guys who's proven they can be a top scorer in one of Europe's top leagues. In fact, if you look before the World Cup last year, I think he played 13 games, admittedly a lot of them off the bench, and scored 1 goal. And even in the second half of the season, when he started getting in that run, I think there are some signs that you could look at that are a bit worrying. Look at the fact that against Inter, when he was marked by De Vrij, against Juventus, when he was marked by Gleison Bremer, those were the games when you saw the least out of him. So I do have a lot of questions about the fee that's being paid, about the pressure that's going to be on this kid. Does he have potential? Bags of it. He's explosive. He's got incredible short-distance acceleration. He's got, I think, crucially, given the pressure that Mark just talked about, some of that young guy swagger that you want to see in a centre-forward who backs himself, is going to try and get into the penalty box and get behind defenders. I like a lot about him, but gosh, it's a lot of pressure.
Why didn't they just say, right, OK, we'll stick with De Gea, Mason Mount do really need him. Why don't they just get all that money together and go, there you are, Daniel Levy, we'll get Harry Kane?
I just think they never thought they could get it done. The conversations I had with United in January were that they didn't want to get involved with Tottenham and wait until the 31st of August, be messed around by Tottenham and then end up with nothing. Ten Hag made it clear he wanted a striker in for the start of the season. He wanted somebody in because you look at United's goal output and it's all about Marcus Rashford. If Rashford doesn't score, United don't score. And Rashford has made it clear that he's not comfortable playing centre forward. So Ten Hag made it clear he wanted the centre forward in, and there was no way United felt they could get Kane done in that time. Even if they'd offered 120, 130 million pounds, Daniel Levy would wait for even more. So I just think they decided to play the long game and go for a guy that they hope will be the next big thing. And United might get lucky. They tried it in the past. They tried it with Memphis Depay and it was a disaster. They tried it with Anthony last year, another big gamble on a young player that hasn't really paid off. So at some point they're hoping they get it right. They looked at Benjamin Sesko a year ago when he was at Salzburg, and he's now ended up at Leipzig, but that didn't come off either. So it's just a leap. They've basically gone for a guy that they really, really hope can pull it off. But I do know that United have got, I won't say doubts about it. I think they realised that they probably got him a year or two too soon, but they need a striker. And I think the options, apart from Hojlund, were pretty limited. So it's a gamble, but, they are due a good one to come off, to be honest.
So are we saying, Augie, that Man United, all right, I know they didn't want to wait to the 31st of August and be gazumped, but are we saying they didn't even test the water with Daniel Levy? They didn't even get a feel for, well, there might be a deal to be done here and we'll get it done quick. Maybe we'll get into negotiations with Tottenham. Or did they just say, we're not dealing with him, full stop, and that's it? That doesn't really seem like a very sensible strategy, does it?
No, I've always got the impression that United would like to go for Kane, but didn't think they'd get him. And if that's your position, you're right. push as hard as you can, and then make a big play for Kane early in the summer. If it doesn't come off, go back for Hojlund, because there isn't a massive market out there for Rasmus Hojlund. So, but ultimately, they might have got word as well that Harry Kane wants to win trophies, and right now Bayern Munich have got a better chance of winning trophies, the big trophies, than Man United. So, Bayern Munich is not a bad move for Harry Kane. It's a great move, but I just think United aren't what they used to be in terms of attracting players to the club. Maybe 2 or 3 years' time they might be, but they're not that team anymore that players, like Van Persie said, they said the small kid inside him was crying to go to Man United. Well, that doesn't happen anymore, does it? Man City, they're drawing Manchester now, and it's Liverpool as well. So it's painful for United, but they're not a big draw for the big players anymore. So they have to go for a player like Hojlund and hope he becomes, like you said, the next big thing.
But you look at the risks already. That money for a youngster is a risk, there's no doubt. Jadon Sancho, there was an element of risk, and that's proven correct, and that was a lot of money. Antony was a risk, and looks as if unconvincing that he's going to have any consistency. And as Mark said, back in their heyday, they didn't, particularly in this position, the striker role, they went for tried and trusted. Sheringham, Cole, Van Nistelrooy, Van Persie, Eric Cantona.
No gambles at all.
The list goes on, because this is such a key position. Not that the others aren't, but this position makes the difference. Ferguson knew it and always wanted, if he could get it, the best in the business. And would send David Gill out, go and get him. He would try everything under the sun to get that player for that position.
And now City are doing that. We didn't sit here and talk about Haaland being a gamble at all, did we?
No,
And City tried to get Kane before Haaland. Obviously a year or so before, but were put off ultimately by the money. But Tottenham are not in the position that they were then to sort of say, no, we're not selling Harry Kane under any circumstances. They're not really in that position because of Kane's contract.
What? The only upside of this is that this guy gets better.
Okay.
The downside is all over the shop. Paying 75 mil for a guy who, as Nicky said, scored 9 goals, a guy who always got potential. I mean, look down the motorway at Nunez at Liverpool. 80 million, right? And all we got last year from everybody was, overpriced. And Man United have been done again as far as overpriced when they're buying somebody. But at least Nunez is in a position where Klopp could take him out and he still had somebody who could play for Liverpool and produce. This guy's going to get thrown in, and if he doesn't produce, he's going to get slaughtered, and they don't have anybody else to slot in. Liverpool were taking Nunez off and putting Diaz in. Man United are going to fling Hojlund in, who's not ready. They're going to pull him out, and who are they putting in? They don't have anybody. So the pressure on this kid is insane. 20 years of age, absolutely insane. He could go down the plug with the pressure, no question. And the chances of that are way higher than him actually fulfilling his potential.
Then you're asking Marcus Rashford to play through the middle, where he can do it, but last year he was sublime from the left-hand side. And spare me anybody that brings up Anthony Martial, because that just ain't happening. And Jadon Sancho is not going to play in that position. He's just not going to play in that position. They're searching for this player. Nobody's saying the young man's not a good player. Nobody's saying that. But this club, when you're chasing City, Arsenal, potentially Liverpool and others, you need somebody that when you're having a mediocre performance is going to be the difference. And that man is Harry Kane. And it's bewildering that they've had this stance. Well, Daniel Levy's been a pain in the butt before and he's been so difficult to deal with. We're just not even going to go back there. And that's a crazy way to think about it. There's going to be more of that, isn't there?
What, shouting at Harry?
You mentioned that. Actually mentioned
that. Why would you do that?
As Nicky said,
you don't like it, Steve?
Are you kidding me?
Oh, show me a goalkeeper that's never shouted at defenders.
I thought you'd just be saying, well, that's
no. He's just come to the club, right? And he's absolutely gone after Harry Maguire.
Right.
That tells you that while he's getting his position and doing all his saves, the first thing he did after he made the save was chase Harry Maguire. That's a real calm, cool, collected goalkeeper, isn't it?
Right.
Who's been there for 2 seconds, and you go chasing a guy who's struggling a little bit, who made a mistake, and the last thing he needs is anybody down his throat, particularly a guy who's just walked in the dressing room.
Oh, you sentimental old
I'll tell you
fool.
what, I tell you.
Oh, here he goes. Harry Maguire, his feelings are hurt.
Harry
As a centre
Maguire.
half, for God's sake.
I hope Harry Maguire, when he got back in the dressing room, went up to him and stuck his finger in his face and said, "Don't you do that to me again."
Really?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, I haven't got a problem with that.
Right.
He tried to show he's a big man or something.
Okay.
Getting after players.
Right.
Nonsense.
You disagree?
I didn't mind. Listen, I've never seen a goalie. I've rarely seen a goalie that doesn't scream and shout at everybody.
Right.
You know, a midfielder or a centre half that doesn't close the ball down from 25 yards.
That's embarrassing him on the field, Craig.
Well, but look at.
You've embarrassed him on the field.
But look at Bruce. Look at Bruce, and I know it's a different scenario. Look at Bruce and Pallister, and we all played in that era, and Irwin and Gary Neville and Roy Keane. I mean, Roy Keane and Schmeichel used to get at it all the time.
But they
Pallister and Bruce
other.
and the keepers were absolutely at it. If Peter Schmeichel didn't get what he wanted from those two centre halves. And I get it, he's just in the door.
Correct.
I understand.
But that's
his
the most
character.
important factor.
But
Bruce and Pallister and all them were going after each other after they played together for a long time. So they knew the score.
You watched him in the
Champions League. Walked through the door and he's giving it all this.
Right, but you watched him. We watched him in the Champions League final and other Champions League games, and you said to me, this guy is not short of confidence. And that was.
And I also said he's got a mistake in him. And I'll tell you what, the first time he makes a mistake, I hope Harry Maguire runs after him and gives him all that.
Well, he'll need to do it from the bench.
That's really good for the team.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN Plus.